Good evening, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about Christopher Nolan and how he was influenced by film noir and how he kind of updated the genre and brought it back to the mainstream with his new and exciting directing style. So just a little bit of a brief background on our boy. He was born in London in 1970, where he started making films at the age of 7 on his dad's old Super 8 camera. And he continued doing that through college, where he obtained a bachelor's degree in English literature. And in 1998, he released his first movie, Following, which he made on a $6,000 budget, which was quite successful in the independent film community and gained him the recognition needed to make his first blockbuster movie, Memento, which was nominated for multiple Academy Awards and Golden Globes. And this allowed him to direct the Dark Knight trilogy and kind of make it into the spotlight. And then after that, he kind of took off. So some of his notable films include Following and Memento, which probably most closely follow with kind of the classic film noir. And you can see some of the films that influenced those movies there. And then obviously he made the Dark Knight trilogy, Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, most recently Tenet, and there's just kind of a brief overview of how Christopher Nolan was influenced by film noir. So while Nolan repeatedly references the influence of films like Double Indemnity, especially in his film Memento, he also states that he wants to bring noir films up to date. He doesn't want to reference too obviously the cinematic idea of what film noir is. Specifically, you can't really have guys walking around in fedoras anymore. But Memento, along with his first film, Following, are both filmed in kind of a flashback where the opening scene is not really given context and then it isn't recontextualized until the climax of the film, which is very similar to Double Indemnity, so there is that influence there. Another thing he really likes about film noir is the kind of convoluted, confusing narrative structures that keep the audience wondering about the true natures of the characters they are watching. And whether it be through his destabilizing narrative structures or the dark nature of his characters, the fingerprints of film noir are all over the films of Christopher Nolan, either explicitly, like in Following and Memento as mentioned, or implicitly, like in his films Insomnia and The Prestige, or kind of somewhere in between, like in Inception and The Dark Knight. And some of the ways he moves away from the classic film noir is he has this kind of obsession with a character's subjective experience of time, and he often uses reverse chronology and flashbacks rather than telling a story in a linear fashion. So that's kind of like a big thing that he does in like most, if not all, of his movies, at least in some way. And then another way that he moves away from kind of the classic idea of a film noir is that he has a much more anti-fatalist point of view when it comes to how he explores his protagonists, which has configured the genre into a significant staple of Hollywood filmmaking, and that genre being neo-noir. But yeah, kind of just the idea that no matter what the flaws of the protagonist might be, they are able to redeem themselves in the end. So kind of just a brief overview of what exactly neo-noir means in respect to film noir is as follows. Neo-noir is a genre that has been on the rise as of recent, with films such as Seven, John Wick, the Blade Runner movies, and the Dark Knight trilogy, and more. Neo-noir films contain many of the same elements found in the classics, like femme fatales, anti-heroes, and complex storylines, but they differ in that they often move away from the classic detective solving a murder, or private eye getting mixed up with a woman who murdered her husband, like those kind of plot lines, and instead offers up more creative takes on the genre with science fiction films such as Blade Runner, or action thrillers such as John Wick or The Dark Knight. And another important distinction that makes neo-noir films different from film noir is they have access to much more advanced technologies and techniques that give them usually a much different feel than classic film noir. Okay, so moving on to Batman Begins, the first in the Dark Knight trilogy, and the influence of some noir on that. So while Bruce Wayne, the protagonist, doesn't really fit the typical profile of a noir anti-hero, he still embodies some of the same flawed characteristics. He abuses his power and wealth of the company he's inherited from his father to become a vigilante and kind of dole out street justice outside the law, and kind of tries to avoid his real problems for his own fantasy that his borderline criminal methods will bring peace to the city eventually. And like the greatest noir heroes, Bruce Wayne is not driven by heroism, but by guilt, whether he realizes it or not. And kind of some of the more visual aspects of film noir we see in this movie are kind of just like darkness and, you know, the shadowy city filled with corruption, and it's always raining, and most of the movie is kind of filmed at night, so it's dark out. And this movie really delves deeply into the roots of fear and how it affects people. We have a femme fatale as well in Rachel Dawes, which is another classic element of film noir. And another thing is kind of the internal conflict in the protagonist, and in that Bruce is trying to save Gotham City in hopes that he will be able to save himself and kind of repair the damage and emotional scarring that he has experienced. And another thing that I noticed that is quite interesting is that Gotham looks very similar to Fritz Lang's Metropolis, and we'll see that in the next slide. So as you can see there, like, very clearly influenced each other, like a lot of similarities there. I'll just give you a second to look at it. And then I just kind of picked out this scene from Batman Begins, kind of just show Christopher Nolan's take on like the modern noir atmosphere, city type deal. So we'll just watch a bit of this.
Flash, I have kids to feed.
Well, you don't like falafel?
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
I don't know. I never knew. Never. They went to some guy for a couple of days before they went to the dealer.
Why?
There was something else in the drugs. Something hidden.
What?
I never went to the drop-off point. It was in the Narrows. Cops only go there when they're enforced.
Do I look like a cop?
Yeah, so just kind of give you an idea of some of the influences for Batman Begins, a little visual context. Yeah, definitely, like, you can see the anti-hero aspects, and also just like the classic walking down a sketchy alleyway and getting attacked kind of dealio. So yeah, that's it for that, and then I'll just quickly talk about The Dark Knight as well. Now this movie is heavily influenced by the neo-noir film Heat, which was made in 1995 and directed by Michael Mann. And Nolan kind of like took a lot from this movie and applied kind of the same concept that cops and criminals are two sides of the same coin, with kind of the rivalry of Batman and the Joker. And he also pays a slight homage to the 1950s film from Stanley Kubrick called The Killing. But yeah, this movie, the main kind of like anti-hero in this film is Harvey Dent, or Two-Face. And he is kind of likened to some of the detectives of like the 50s noir films, such as Glenn Ford in The Big Heat. And we can literally see the pain of fighting crime as it manifests itself on the scars that cover his face. And another interesting thing about the two last Dark Knight movies is that instead of trying to really comment on social issues, Nolan kind of brings them up while cleansing them of their social significance and replacing it with narrative and audience satisfaction. So kind of instead of making it a social commentary, he kind of just like lets the he shows the social issues, but he kind of lets them fall into the background, and replaces it with kind of more action and something that an audience might find more entertaining, which I thought was pretty interesting. And just kind of the last thing I wanted to show for The Dark Knight was just how heavily it was influenced by Heat. This video kind of puts them side by side just to show you like how closely they mirror each other. So take a look at that.
Stay down. We want to hurt no one. We're here for the bank's money, not your money. The money's stranger.
Yeah, so again, not all those clips were from Heat, but it's just interesting to see how heavily Christopher Nolan was influenced by Michael Mann. Okay, and oh yeah, there's one more thing I just wanted to show. This picture, this is from Stanley Kubrick's The Killing, and this is from The Dark Knight. You can see that they definitely share some similarities there. So that was definitely an influence as well. And let me just wrap this up real quick and then we'll be done. So yeah, in conclusion, Nolan wanted to bring the film noir into the 21st century, and ever since 1998 he's been doing a pretty good job. He uses classic elements of film noir while adding his own unmistakable flair with his anti-fatalist view. He also loves toying with the idea of time, favoring complex storylines with non-linear progression. And he draws heavily from films like Double Indemnity, The Killing, Heat, and more. He loves to explore the possibility that his morally flawed protagonist can escape from noir's pitch-black shadow, while on the other hand, his antagonists follow more closely with the classic noir, where they're still linked to the fears he sees as heavily populating and defining the noir landscape. So yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for watching.